Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other girls at Riverside High School. While her classmates spent their weekends at the mall trying on the latest fashions, Sarah could be found at the local Army surplus store, carefully examining tactical gear and military equipment. Her bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of pop stars or movie celebrities, but rather with photographs of military aircraft, maps of famous battles, and newspaper clippings about women serving in combat roles. The 17-year-old had grown up in a military family. Her father, Colonel James Martinez, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before retiring to take a teaching position at the nearby military academy. Her older brother, Miguel, was currently deployed overseas with the Army Rangers. From as early as she could remember, Sarah had listened to stories of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds formed between soldiers who served together. Unlike many of her peers who saw military service as something distant and abstract, Sarah understood the weight of the uniform and the responsibility that came with it. She had seen her mother Lisa cry herself to sleep during her father's deployments, had felt the anxiety that gripped the family whenever news of casualties reached them, and had experienced the overwhelming relief when her father returned home safely each time. This background shaped everything about Sarah's personality and appearance. She preferred practical clothing over fashionable outfits, choosing sturdy boots over delicate shoes and functional backpacks over trendy purses. Her long dark hair was usually pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she rarely wore makeup, preferring a natural look that wouldn't run or smudge during physical activities. At school, Sarah's differences made her a target for ridicule from certain groups of students. The popular crowd, led by Madison Wells and her circle of friends, seemed to take particular pleasure in mocking Sarah's appearance and interests. Madison, whose father was a successful real estate developer, embodied everything that Sarah was not. She wore designer clothes, carried expensive handbags, and spent more on a single pair of shoes than Sarah's family spent on groceries in a month. The harassment had started small during Sarah's freshman year. It began with whispered comments about her weird clothes and escalated to more direct confrontations as the years passed. By her senior year, the mockery had become a daily occurrence. Madison and her friends would make loud comments about Sarah's Army surplus store wardrobe whenever she walked past them in the hallways. The situation reached its peak during the week leading up to the school's annual Spirit Week festivities. Each day had a different theme, and students were encouraged to dress up accordingly. Monday was Pajama Day, Tuesday was Decades Day, Wednesday was Color Wars, Thursday was Career Day, and Friday was School Spirit Day, culminating in the homecoming football game. Sarah had been looking forward to Career Day because it gave her an opportunity to showcase her passion for military service without feeling self-conscious about it. She had carefully planned her outfit, choosing her most authentic-looking military surplus items. She wore clean-pressed camouflage pants, polished combat boots, and a military-styled jacket that had belonged to her father during his service years. When Sarah arrived at school that Thursday morning, she felt confident and proud. She had researched military protocols and made sure every detail of her outfit was appropriate and respectful. She wasn't trying to impersonate an active service member, but rather to honor the profession she hoped to join after graduation. However, her confidence quickly evaporated when she encountered Madison and her group near the main entrance to the school. Madison took one look at Sarah's carefully chosen outfit and burst into exaggerated laughter that echoed through the crowded hallway. "Oh my goodness, look everyone," Madison announced loudly, making sure her voice carried to as many students as possible. "Sarah thinks she's some kind of soldier. Did you get lost on your way to play Army in the woods?" The comment drew laughter from Madison's friends and several other students who had gathered to watch the daily drama unfold. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. She had learned from her father that dignity in the face of adversity was one of the most important qualities a person could possess. "It's Career Day," Sarah replied quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "I'm representing my future career in the military." This only seemed to fuel Madison's cruel amusement. "Your future career?" She scoffed. "Playing dress-up doesn't make you a soldier, Sarah. Real military people would probably laugh at you just as much as we are. You look like you're wearing a costume from a thrift store." Several students pulled out their phones to record the confrontation. sensing that this was going to be more dramatic than the usual hallway teasing. Anna! Sarah noticed the cameras but refused to give them the reaction they were hoping for. Instead, she squared her shoulders and looked Madison directly in the eyes. "My father served 3 tours in Afghanistan," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "My brother is currently deployed with the Army Rangers. I've been accepted to the military academy, and I'll be starting my training next summer. This isn't a costume or a game to me." Madison's expression shifted slightly, as if she hadn't expected Sarah to fight back with such conviction. But rather than backing down, she doubled down on her attack. "Oh, so you think because your family plays soldier that makes you special?" Madison taunted. "Newsflash, Sarah wearing camo doesn't make you tough. You're still the same weird girl who doesn't know how to dress properly or fit in with normal people." The crowd around them had grown larger, with students forming a circle to watch the confrontation. Sarah could hear whispers and giggles from various directions, and she knew that videos of this moment would probably be circulating on social media within minutes. Throughout the rest of the day, the mockery continued. In her first period English class, Sarah overheard 2 students behind her making jokes about her military fantasy. During lunch, she sat alone while groups of students pointed at her and laughed. In the hallways between classes, she endured more comments about her appearance and her career aspirations. The worst moment came during her afternoon history class. The teacher, Peterson, had asked students to present briefly about their career choices as part of the career day activities. When Sarah stood up to speak about her plans to attend the military academy and eventually become a helicopter pilot, several students in the back of the classroom began making helicopter sounds and pretending to fly around in their seats. "That's enough," Mr. Peterson said sternly. But the damage was already done. Sarah's presentation was completely derailed, and she sat down feeling humiliated and defeated. By the time the final bell rang, Sarah was emotionally exhausted. She had maintained her dignity throughout the day, but the constant barrage of mockery and ridicule had taken its toll. As she walked to her locker to gather her books, she could hear students still making comments about her outfit and her career aspirations. Madison appeared one final time as Sarah was packing her backpack. "I hope you learned something today," Madison said with false sweetness. "Maybe tomorrow you'll dress like a normal person instead of playing pretend soldier." Sarah closed her locker and turned to face her tormentor one last time. "I learned that some people will always try to tear down others who have dreams bigger than their own understanding," she replied calmly. "But that doesn't change what I'm going to accomplish." As Sarah walked toward the exit, she passed by the bulletin board, where information about the next day's homecoming football game was posted. The game would be the culmination of Spirit Week, with the entire school community gathering to support their team against their biggest rivals. It was supposed to be a celebration of school pride and unity, but for Sarah, it represented just another opportunity for public humiliation. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours everything would change. The same students who had mocked her military aspirations would witness something that would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about courage, service, and what it really meant to wear the uniform. As Sarah drove home that afternoon, she reflected on the day's events. Her mother noticed her subdued mood during dinner and asked if everything was all right. Sarah considered telling her parents about the harassment she had endured, but she knew it would only worry them unnecessarily. Instead, she assured them that school was fine and excused herself early to work on homework. In her room that night, Sarah looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was still wearing the camouflage outfit that had attracted so much ridicule during the day. Despite everything that had happened, she still felt proud of what it represented. The uniform wasn't just clothing to her. It was a symbol of service, sacrifice, and commitment to something greater than oneself. She thought about her father's stories of boot camp, where drill sergeants had broken down recruits' civilian identities to build them back up as soldiers. She thought about her brother's letters from overseas, describing the brotherhood he had found with his fellow Rangers. She thought about the military academy waiting for her after graduation, where she would finally be surrounded by people who understood and shared her values. As she prepared for bed, Sarah made a decision. Tomorrow, she would attend the homecoming game just like any other student. She wouldn't let Madison's cruelty drive her into hiding. She would face whatever new harassment came her way, with the same dignity and strength that her father had taught her to value above all else. She had no idea that her father had been making phone calls throughout the evening, reaching out to old military contacts, and arranging something that would change not just Sarah's life, but the entire perspective of Riverside High School. The girl who had been mocked for her camouflage would soon discover that sometimes the most powerful moments come from the most unexpected places, and that true courage isn't about avoiding ridicule. It's about standing firm in your convictions even when the whole world seems to be laughing at you. Colonel James Martinez had noticed his daughter's subdued mood the moment she walked through the front door that evening. After 22 years of military service, he had developed an acute ability to read people's emotional states, and Sarah's forced smile didn't fool him for a second. Throughout dinner, he watched as she picked at her food and gave short, distracted answers to her mother's questions about school. When Sarah excused herself early to work on homework, James exchanged a meaningful glance with his wife, Lisa. They had both seen this pattern before during Sarah's high school years. Their daughter was strong and resilient, but she was also proud, sometimes too proud to ask for help when she needed it most. After Lisa went to bed, James sat in his home office, staring at a framed photograph of his old unit from his first deployment in Afghanistan. The men and women in that picture had become more than fellow soldiers. They had become family. They had watched each other's backs, supported each other through impossible circumstances, and never let anyone face their battles alone. That night, Sarah had seemed more defeated than usual, and James suspected something significant had happened at school. He knew about the ongoing harassment from some of her classmates. Despite Sarah's attempts to keep it private, parents of teenagers tend to hear things through various channels. What bothered him most wasn't just that his daughter was being bullied, but that she was being mocked for the very values and aspirations that he had worked so hard to instill in her. James had always been careful not to pressure Sarah into following a military path. When she had expressed interest in attending the military academy, he had made sure it was her decision, not his influence. He had seen too many military children rebel against their parents' careers, and he wanted Sarah to choose her own path freely. But now that she had made that choice, he felt a deep responsibility to protect her right to pursue it without harassment. Around 11 o'clock, James picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Master Sergeant Tony Rodriguez had served under James's command during 2 deployments and had remained a close friend after both men had returned to civilian life. Tony was now stationed at the nearby Fort Henderson, working as a training instructor for new pilots. "Jimmy!" Tony's voice boomed through the phone when he answered. "How's retirement treating you, sir?" "It's good, Tony, but I'm not calling about retirement," James replied, his voice taking on the serious tone that his old subordinates would recognize immediately. "I need a favor, and it's important." James explained the situation with Sarah, describing the harassment she had been facing and the particular intensity of the previous day's events. He could hear Tony's breathing change as the story progressed, and when James finished, there was a moment of silence on the line. "Sir, with all due respect, what you're describing makes me absolutely furious," Tony said finally. "That girl of yours is planning to serve her country, and some spoiled teenagers think that's something to laugh at? I know you understand the situation," James continued. "The thing is, tomorrow is their homecoming football game. The whole school will be there, including the kids who have been giving Sarah trouble. I was wondering if there might be a way to show these students what real military service looks like." Tony was quiet for a moment, and James could almost hear the wheels turning in his friend's mind. "You know what, sir? I think I might have an idea. Let me make some phone calls tonight and see what I can arrange. No promises, but I think we might be able to put together something educational for those kids." After hanging up with Tony, James sat back in his chair and smiled for the first time all day. He wasn't planning anything vindictive or cruel. That wasn't the military way. But perhaps it was time for Riverside High School to receive a real education about the men and women who served their country. Meanwhile, across town, Tony Rodriguez was already dialing another number. Captain Maria Santos answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "Rodriguez, this better be important," she said, but her tone was friendly. Maria and Tony had gone through flight school together and had maintained their friendship through various postings and assignments. "Maria, I need to ask you about something, and I know it's going to sound crazy," Tony began. He explained James's situation and his idea for giving the students at Riverside High School a demonstration they wouldn't soon forget. "So, you want to what exactly?" Maria asked when Tony finished his explanation. "I want to show up at their homecoming game tomorrow night with some aircraft and give these kids a real demonstration of what military service looks like," Tony replied. Nothing dangerous or disruptive, just something that will make them think twice before they mock someone's desire to serve. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Tony, you realize what you're asking for here? We can't just fly military aircraft to a high school football game without proper authorization and planning. I know, Tony said quickly. But think about it, Maria. This isn't just about one kid being bullied. This is about changing attitudes toward military service. How many other young people might be discouraged from serving because they're afraid of being ridiculed? Maria sighed, but Tony could tell he was getting through to her. Let me guess, you already have a plan forming in that head of yours. Actually, I do, Tony admitted. Tomorrow afternoon, there's a scheduled training exercise for the new pilot candidates. What if we extended that exercise to include a community outreach component? We've been talking about improving military-civilian relations, right? Tony Rodriguez, you are either a genius or completely insane, Maria said, but there was amusement in her voice. Give me 30 minutes to make some phone calls. If I can get authorization for a community demonstration, would you be able to coordinate the ground logistics? Absolutely, Tony replied without hesitation. And Maria, thank you for even considering this. Over the next several hours, a chain of phone calls spread through various military offices and installations. Maria contacted her commanding officer, who was initially skeptical but became intrigued when she explained the potential for positive community relations. The commanding officer reached out to the public affairs office, which saw an opportunity for good publicity and community engagement. By 3 a.m, a plan had taken shape. The military would conduct what they termed a community outreach demonstration at Riverside High School's homecoming game. The demonstration would feature several aircraft and would be framed as an educational presentation about career opportunities in military aviation. The next morning, James Martinez received a call from Tony Rodriguez. Sir, you're not going to believe what we've managed to put together, Tony said, his excitement evident in his voice. James listened as Tony described the plan that had come together overnight. A team of military personnel would arrive at the football game during halftime to conduct a demonstration that would showcase various aspects of military aviation. The presentation would be professional, educational, and completely legitimate, but it would also be impossible for the students to ignore. Tony, this is incredible, James said when his friend finished explaining. But are you sure you can pull this off? I don't want anyone getting in trouble because of my daughter's situation. Sir, everything we're doing is completely above board, Tony assured him. In fact, the brass is excited about the community engagement opportunity. This is going to be a legitimate military demonstration with full authorization. Does Sarah know about any of this? James asked. No, sir, and I recommend we keep it that way. Let this be a complete surprise. But you might want to make sure she attends the game tonight. James hung up the phone with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had served in combat zones around the world, but the prospect of surprising his daughter and her entire school felt almost as intense as any mission he had ever undertaken. That afternoon, James found Sarah in her room, apparently debating whether to attend the homecoming game. She had been quiet all day, clearly still affected by the previous day's events at school. You know, sweetheart, I think you should go to the game tonight, James said casually. It's your senior year, and you shouldn't let other people's ignorance prevent you from participating in school activities. Sarah looked up at her father with a mixture of skepticism and resignation. Dad, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but going to that game will just give Madison and her friends another opportunity to make fun of me in front of the entire school. I understand your concern, James replied, but running away from difficult situations isn't the answer. Besides, you never know what might happen. Sometimes life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. There was something in her father's tone that made Sarah look at him more closely. He had a slight smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye that she recognized from her childhood. It was the same expression he wore when he was planning a surprise birthday party, or had arranged something special that he knew would make her happy. Dad, what aren't you telling me? Sarah asked suspiciously. Nothing at all, James replied with exaggerated innocence. I just think it would be good for you to show your face at the game. Demonstrate that you're not intimidated by a few immature classmates. Sarah studied her father's face for a moment longer, then shrugged. Fine, I'll go to the game. But if this turns into another humiliation session, I'm leaving early. Fair enough, James agreed. But I have a feeling you're going to want to stay for the whole thing. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave for the football game, she had no idea that military personnel from 3 different bases were already en route to her school. She had no idea that her father had spent the previous night coordinating with his old military contacts to arrange something unprecedented in the history of Riverside High School. As she grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, Sarah was simply hoping to get through the evening without any major confrontations. She was planning to sit quietly in the stands, watch the game, and prove to herself that she wouldn't be driven away from school activities by a group of bullies. She had no way of knowing that in a few hours, the same classmates who had mocked her military aspirations would be witnessing a display of military precision and power that would change their understanding of what it meant to serve one's country. The girl who had been ridiculed for wearing camouflage was about to receive a demonstration of support that would echo far beyond the boundaries of a high school football game. The Riverside High School football stadium was buzzing with excitement as the homecoming game entered its second quarter. The stands were packed with students, parents, and community members, all dressed in the school colors of blue and gold. The smell of popcorn and hot dogs filled the crisp autumn air, and the marching band's enthusiastic performance echoed across the field between plays. Sarah Martinez sat alone in the middle section of the bleachers, trying to blend in with the crowd while maintaining enough distance to avoid any confrontations with Madison and her group. She had chosen her seat carefully, positioning herself where she could watch the game but also make a quick exit if necessary. Her father's encouragement had convinced her to attend, but she was still wary about spending the evening in such a public setting. The game itself was exciting, with Riverside trailing their rivals by only 3 points at halftime. The crowd was energetic and engaged, cheering loudly for every good play and groaning dramatically at every mistake. Sarah found herself getting caught up in the excitement despite her initial reluctance to be there. Madison Wells and her circle of friends had claimed their usual spots in the front row of the student section, where they could be seen and admired by as many people as possible. Madison wore a designer outfit in the school colors, complete with perfectly coordinated accessories, that probably cost more than most students' entire wardrobes. Throughout the first half, she had been holding court with her usual mix of gossip, fashion commentary, and subtle put-downs of classmates who didn't meet her standards. When Madison spotted Sarah in the stands, she made sure to point her out to her friends with exaggerated whispers and not-so-subtle glances in her direction. However, to Sarah's relief, the distance between them and the noise of the crowd prevented any direct confrontation during the first half of the game. As halftime approached, the marching band began setting up for their halftime show. Students started making trips to the concession stands, and the general atmosphere was festive and celebratory. Sarah was beginning to think that maybe her father had been right about attending the game. Perhaps she had been overthinking the potential for trouble. The halftime show began with the marching band's traditional performance, featuring elaborate formations and the school fight song. The crowd sang along enthusiastically, and even Sarah found herself humming the familiar melody. The homecoming court was introduced, with this year's king and queen receiving their crowns amid cheers and applause from their classmates. Just as the formal halftime activities were concluding and everyone expected the teams to return to the field for the second half, the stadium's public address system crackled to life with an announcement that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, students and community members," the announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, "we have a very special surprise for you this evening. Please direct your attention to the eastern end of the field for a demonstration of American military aviation excellence." The crowd murmured in confusion, looking around at each other with puzzled expressions. Sarah felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension, remembering her father's mysterious confidence about the evening's events. Then, in the distance, they heard it, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotor blades cutting through the night air. The sound grew steadily louder, and everyone in the stadium began scanning the dark sky for the source of the noise. "Oh my God!" someone in the crowd shouted, pointing toward the eastern horizon. "Look!" Emerging from the darkness, a military helicopter appeared, its navigation lights creating a striking pattern against the black sky. But this wasn't just any helicopter, it was an Apache attack helicopter, one of the most advanced and formidable aircraft in the United States military arsenal. The Apache approached the stadium with precision and grace, its pilot demonstrating the kind of skill that comes only from years of intensive training and experience. As it drew closer, the crowd could see every detail of the aircraft's sleek, intimidating design. The helicopter's advanced weapons systems, sophisticated sensors, and armored hull made it clear that this was a machine designed for serious military operations. The crowd in the stadium fell into stunned silence as the Apache performed a slow, controlled circuit around the football field. The pilot maintained a safe altitude and distance from the stands, but the aircraft was close enough for everyone to appreciate its impressive size and technological sophistication. Sarah watched in amazement, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. She had studied Apache helicopters extensively, reading about their capabilities and dreaming of someday piloting one herself. To see one in person, performing a demonstration at her own school's football game, felt almost surreal. The Apache completed its circuit and then came to a hover directly over the center of the football field. The precise control demonstrated by the pilot was breathtaking. The aircraft remained perfectly stable despite the challenging conditions of flying at night over a crowded area. Then, as if one Apache helicopter wasn't impressive enough, two more aircraft appeared from different directions. A Black Hawk utility helicopter approached from the south, while a Chinook heavy-lift helicopter came from the north. The three aircraft performed a coordinated maneuver that showcased their different capabilities and roles within military operations. The crowd in the stadium was now completely captivated by the aerial display. Students who had been talking and laughing just moments before were now standing in awed silence watching as some of America's most advanced military aircraft demonstrated their capabilities directly overhead. But the demonstration was far from over. The public address system crackled back to life as the aircraft continued their coordinated flight patterns.
What you're witnessing tonight, the announcer explained, is a demonstration by the men and women of the United States Army Aviation Branch. These pilots and crew members represent the finest military aviation traditions, and they're here tonight to honor one of your own students who has chosen to dedicate her life to military service.
Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as she realized what was happening. Somehow, impossibly, this entire demonstration was connected to her. She looked around frantically, trying to spot her father in the crowd, knowing somehow that he had to be involved in this incredible surprise. The announcer continued, Sarah Martinez, a senior here at Riverside High School, has been accepted to the United States Military Academy, where she plans to pursue a career in military aviation. Tonight's demonstration is dedicated to her and to all young Americans who choose to serve their country. Every head in the stadium turned to look at Sarah, who was now standing in shock, tears streaming down her face. The same students who had mocked her military aspirations just 24 hours earlier were now staring at her with expressions of amazement and respect. Madison Wells, who had been sitting in the front row making snide comments about the boring military show, suddenly found herself in an uncomfortable position. The realization that this entire spectacular demonstration was honoring the girl she had been tormenting was clearly visible on her face. The Apache helicopter that had been hovering over the center of the field began to descend toward the football field itself. The pilot executed a perfect landing, touching down on the 50-yard line with a precision that demonstrated years of training and experience. The rotor blades continued to turn, but at a reduced speed that allowed people to approach the aircraft safely. From the helicopter emerged a figure in full military flight gear. The pilot removed their helmet, revealing the face of Captain Maria Santos, a decorated combat veteran who had flown numerous missions in support of ground operations overseas. She walked toward the stands with the confident stride of someone who had faced real danger and emerged victorious. "Good evening, Riverside High School," Captain Santos called out, her voice carrying easily across the now silent stadium. "I'm Captain Maria Santos, and I've had the honor of flying Apache helicopters in support of American ground forces in 3 different combat zones." The crowd listened in rapt attention as Captain Santos began to speak about military aviation, the training required to become a military pilot, and the opportunities available to young people interested in serving their country. Her words carried the weight of genuine experience and the authority of someone who had proven herself in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. "Flying military aircraft isn't just about the machines," Captain Santos explained. "It's about dedication, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to protecting your fellow service members and your country. It requires years of intensive training, both physical and mental preparation, and the courage to put yourself in harm's way for the sake of others." As she spoke, other military personnel emerged from the Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters. They formed a line on the football field representing different specialties within military aviation: pilots, crew chiefs, mechanics, and support personnel. Each wore their dress uniform with pride, their ribbons and badges telling stories of service and accomplishment. Master Sergeant Tony Rodriguez stepped forward to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see here tonight represents the finest traditions of American military service. These men and women have dedicated their lives to protecting our freedom and our way of life. They've made sacrifices that most people will never understand, and they've done so willingly because they believe in something greater than themselves. The sergeant's words carried across the stadium with the gravity that comes from genuine conviction. When young people like Sarah Martinez choose to follow this path, they're not just choosing a career, they're choosing to be part of a tradition of service that dates back to the founding of our nation. Sarah sat in the stands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. The helicopters, the pilots, the demonstration, it was all more than she had ever dreamed possible. But more than the spectacle itself, she was moved by the message being delivered to her classmates and community. The same students who had mocked her military aspirations were now seeing what those aspirations really meant. They were witnessing firsthand the skill, dedication, and professionalism required to serve in military aviation. The playing dress-up that Madison had ridiculed was being revealed as preparation for one of the most demanding and important careers possible. As Captain Santos concluded her remarks, she made an announcement that sent another wave of excitement through the crowd. "We'd like to invite Sarah Martinez to come down to the field and meet the crew of these aircraft. Sarah, this demonstration is our way of saying thank you in advance for your decision to serve." With thousands of eyes watching her, Sarah made her way down from the bleachers and onto the football field. Each step felt surreal, as if she were walking through a dream. The girl who had been humiliated just 24 hours earlier was now the guest of honor at a military demonstration that would be talked about for years to come. When Sarah reached the center of the field, Captain Santos shook her hand with military precision and then surprised her with something even more unexpected. "Sarah, would you like to sit in the cockpit of an Apache helicopter?" The crowd erupted in cheers as Sarah nodded eagerly, her dream of becoming a military pilot suddenly feeling more real and achievable than ever before. As she climbed into the cockpit of the Apache, guided by Captain Santos, she looked out at the crowd of her classmates and saw something in their faces that she had never seen before: respect, admiration, and perhaps even a little envy. As Sarah settled into the cockpit of the Apache helicopter, the stadium erupted in thunderous applause. The complex array of instruments, displays, and controls that surrounded her represented years of technological development and millions of dollars in military investment. But more than that, it represented the trust that her country was willing to place in young people who dedicated themselves to military service. Captain Santos climbed into the seat beside her and began explaining the various systems and controls. "This aircraft can fly at speeds up to 150 miles per hour and has a combat radius of over 300 miles, she explained, her voice clearly audible through the helicopter's communication system. "But the most important thing about any military aircraft isn't its technology, it's the person flying it." The crowd watched in fascination as Captain Santos demonstrated some of the Apache's capabilities, pointing out the advanced targeting systems, the sophisticated navigation equipment, and the defensive measures that kept military pilots safe during dangerous missions. Sarah listened intently, asking informed questions that demonstrated her extensive knowledge of military aviation. "You've clearly done your homework," Captain Santos observed with approval. "That kind of preparation and dedication is exactly what we look for in future military aviators." After several minutes in the cockpit, Sarah climbed down from the Apache to find herself surrounded by her classmates. Students who had never spoken to her before were now approaching with questions about military service, flight training, and her future plans. The atmosphere had completely transformed from mockery to genuine curiosity and respect. Madison Wells stood at the edge of the crowd, her usual confidence notably absent. She had watched the entire demonstration with a mixture of shock and growing embarrassment, realizing that her cruel treatment of Sarah had been based on ignorance and prejudice, rather than any real understanding of military service. The demonstration continued, with each of the 3 helicopters taking turns to showcase their unique capabilities. The Black Hawk performed precision maneuvers that demonstrated its utility in transport and medical evacuation missions. The Chinook displayed its impressive lifting capacity by picking up and moving pieces of equipment that had been specially positioned on the field. Master Sergeant Rodriguez took the microphone to address the crowd one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight is just a small sample of what American military aviation can accomplish. Behind every one of these aircraft are hundreds of hours of training, countless maintenance procedures, and the unwavering dedication of military personnel who work around the clock to keep our forces ready for any mission. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. When young people choose military service, they're not playing games or dress up. They're preparing to take on some of the most serious responsibilities that exist in our society. They're preparing to put their lives on the line for people they've never met, in places they may never have heard of, because they believe in the principles that our country was founded on. The sergeant's words carried special weight, coming from someone who had clearly lived the experiences he was describing. His uniform bore the ribbons and badges that told a story of multiple deployments, combat service, and years of dedicated military duty. As the demonstration began to wind down, Colonel James Martinez finally appeared on the field, still wearing his civilian clothes but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. When Sarah saw her father, everything suddenly made sense. The mysterious phone calls, his insistence that she attend the game, his confident smile when she had questioned him earlier. It had all been leading to this moment. "Dad!" Sarah said as she ran to embrace him, tears of gratitude and joy streaming down her face. "How did you manage all of this?" "I had some help from old friends," James replied, gesturing toward Tony Rodriguez and the other military personnel. "When I heard about what happened at school yesterday, I realized it was time for your classmates to understand what military service really means." The reunion between father and daughter was witnessed by the entire stadium, and the crowd responded with another round of enthusiastic applause. The emotional impact of seeing a military family together, celebrating service and sacrifice, was not lost on anyone present. Principal Johnson approached the group on the field, clearly overwhelmed by the evening's events. "Colonel Martinez, I had no idea you were planning something like this. This has been absolutely incredible." "I hope the students learned something tonight," James replied. "Military service isn't something to be mocked or dismissed. It's one of the most honorable career paths a young person can choose." As the helicopters prepared to depart, each aircraft performed a final flyover of the stadium. The Apache led the formation, followed by the Black Hawk and the Chinook, their rotor blades creating a symphony of sound that echoed across the community. The sight of the three aircraft flying in perfect formation against the night sky was breathtaking, and many spectators recorded videos that would be shared thousands of times on social media in the following days. The football teams returned to the field to complete the second half of the game, but it was clear that everyone's attention remained focused on what they had just witnessed. The military demonstration had overshadowed everything else about the evening, creating a shared experience that would be remembered long after the final score was forgotten. In the stands, conversations continued about military service, the complexity of the aircraft they had seen, and the impressive professionalism of the military personnel who had conducted the demonstration. Students who had never seriously considered military careers began asking questions about service academies, ROTC programs, and the various opportunities available within different branches of the military. Madison Wells found herself isolated among her usual group of friends, many of whom were now expressing admiration for Sarah's career choice rather than supporting Madison's previous mockery. The social dynamics that had seemed so important just hours earlier had been completely reshuffled by the evening's events. As the game entered its final quarter, Madison made a decision that surprised even herself. She left her seat in the front row and made her way to where Sarah was sitting with a group of classmates who were asking her questions about military aviation. "Sarah," Madison said quietly, interrupting the conversation, "could I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah looked up in surprise, uncertain about what to expect from her primary tormentor. The other students sensed the tension and created some space for the two girls to talk privately. "I owe you an apology," Madison began, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "What I saw tonight, I had no idea what military service actually meant. I was ignorant and cruel, and I'm sorry." Sarah studied Madison's face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. But what she saw instead was genuine remorse and embarrassment. The girl who had seemed so confident and superior just hours earlier now appeared vulnerable and uncertain. "Thank you for saying that," Sarah replied carefully.
but you should understand that tonight's demonstration doesn't change who I've always been. I've always been serious about military service, even when people thought it was funny to mock me for it. I know that now, Madison admitted. I guess I just never took the time to understand what you were really planning to do. Those pilots tonight, they were incredible, and you're going to be one of them. The conversation between Sarah and Madison was brief, but it represented a significant shift in the social dynamics of their class. Word of Madison's apology spread quickly through the student section, and by the end of the game, it was clear that Sarah's status among her classmates had been fundamentally transformed. When the final whistle blew, Riverside High School had won the game in dramatic fashion, but the victory on the field was overshadowed by the larger victory that Sarah had achieved. As students began filing out of the stadium, many stopped to congratulate her or ask additional questions about her military plans. The Martinez family drove home together that night, with Sarah still processing everything that had happened. The girl who had left for the game feeling apprehensive and isolated was returning home as the most celebrated student in her class. "Dad, I still can't believe you arranged all of that," Sarah said as they pulled into their driveway. "Those helicopters, those pilots, it must have taken incredible coordination to put together." "It did," James admitted. "But it was worth every phone call and every favor I had to call in. You deserve to have people understand what you're choosing to do with your life." Over the following days, the story of the homecoming military demonstration spread far beyond Riverside High School. Local news stations picked up the story, and videos of the helicopter landing went viral on social media platforms. Sarah found herself being interviewed by reporters and receiving messages of support from military personnel around the country. The demonstration had accomplished something much more significant than simply defending one student from bullying. It had created a bridge between the civilian community and the military, helping people understand the skill, dedication, and sacrifice required for military service. Applications to military academies and ROTC programs in the area increased dramatically in the months following the demonstration. Several of Sarah's classmates, inspired by what they had witnessed, began seriously considering military careers for the first time. Madison Wells, meanwhile, underwent her own transformation. The girl who had once defined herself through material possessions and social status began volunteering with organizations that supported military families. She never became close friends with Sarah, but she developed a genuine respect for service members and their families. When graduation day arrived 6 months later, Sarah Martinez walked across the stage to receive her diploma, knowing that her classmates understood and respected her choice to attend the military academy. The girl who had once been mocked for wearing camouflage was now seen as someone who had chosen one of the most challenging and honorable career paths available. Principal Johnson made a special mention of Sarah during his graduation address, noting that her commitment to military service represented the best traditions of American youth. The applause she received was genuine and enthusiastic, a stark contrast to the ridicule she had faced just months earlier. As Sarah prepared to leave for the military academy that summer, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that difficult day when Madison had mocked her career aspirations. The military demonstration had not only vindicated her choices, but had also educated an entire community about the reality of military service. The Apache helicopter that had landed on the football field that homecoming night had carried more than just advanced military technology. It had carried a message about courage, commitment, and the importance of supporting young people who choose to serve their country. For Sarah Martinez, it had carried the validation and recognition that her dreams deserved, transforming her from a target of mockery into a symbol of American military excellence. Years later, when Captain Sarah Martinez returned to Riverside High School as a decorated military pilot to speak at Career Day, she would remember that homecoming night as the moment when everything changed. The girl who had been mocked for her camouflage had become the woman in uniform, proving that sometimes the most powerful response to ridicule is simply the courage to keep pursuing your dreams until the whole world understands their value.